room. I'm your host, Carlo Cordelia, head of product at Alpharank. Welcome to our conversations around best practices for growth through the Olive Branch. Today, live from Detroit, I have Amy McGraw, Chief Experience Officer at Public Service Credit Union, joining us. Welcome, Amy. How are you?
Thanks. I'm not quite in Detroit. That's where public service is. I'm actually down here in Southeast Florida still, but I will be moving up there shortly.
All right, live from Southeast Florida, Amy McGraw. So for those who are new to the series, Alpharank is a guidance system for the Olive Branch. Alpharank keeps your activities pointed towards the maximum dollar output from that Olive Branch. It's a heat-seeking missile, relentlessly focused on balance sheet production. Any marketing activity you run, whether it's a targeted email, postcard with a QR code, or a Google ad, will tell you exactly how many dollars you've booked from that action. Most importantly, how to get more dollars per action. Our system is trained on over 5 billion first-party data points from over 100 participating financial institutions, banks, and credit unions. That's all we do. And from this model, we give you recommendations to, one, bring in high-intent prospects, two, curb abandonment. So really just make the most out of these clicks that you're getting. And then ultimately, number three, focus on quality. Prospects that you can approve who will book to the balance sheet. I'm going to quote a credit union CFO who is now CEO of a $5 billion credit union. And he put it very simply, Carlo, I need bookers, not lookers. And that's what it's all about. So visit us at alpharank.ai to learn more. So for the people in the audience today, we want your participation and your questions. You're going to be in listen-only mode, but you can put in the questions through the Q&A panel. When we get to the Q&A, that's the best part of the show. We'll unmute your line, let you ask your question live, and if you're too shy, we'll just read it out to you. Everybody's going to get an email with a follow-up link to the webinar, recording, any other cool stuff that we come up with. But many in the industry wonder, how can credit unions compete with billion, trillion-dollar banks today when resources and technology partnerships differ so drastically? So today, we've got somebody here who's actually done it and has proven it can be done. So from South Florida, Amy McGraw, Chief Experience Officer, Public Service Credit Union. 20 years of working in the space, doing everything from reshaping public perspection, driving high-profile partnerships, like a deal with the Florida Panthers. You worked in AI, analytics, FinTech. You did great stuff when you were at Tropical. I can attest to that. 55% new accounts through the Florida Young and Free program. So thank you for joining us. But to get us warmed up, just a little bit about yourself. Share any fun facts with the audience today. Oh, we can't hear you.
How's that, better?
It's really, really faint.
Oh, geez.
No, perfect. Keep it that.
Earlier. Okay, good. That may very well be because I had this set and not talking for a while. So I think it's one of those things that just quiets down, whatever.
Too much AI.
Background, whatever. Too much AI. That's right. So anybody who knows me will know the answer to that question in terms of what's one fun fact about me. I have dogs. I love dogs. My world revolves around dogs. I have 4 children, but they're all grown up. I have 3 grandchildren now. So they are my side world, but my kids don't live here anymore and my dogs do. So I now have a world around dogs, even to the point of I have created something with one of my dogs called the Financial Frenchie. You will learn more about that throughout the year coming. Yeah, my world revolves around dogs.
Fantastic. And when it's not dogs, it's credit unions, members, loans, facilitating credit to those who are perhaps credit challenged. But I seem to remember you had a really interesting entry into the credit union space from sports marketing. Something about being at a party and pitching somebody. And it turned out to be the owner of the company or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I was a designated driver this particular evening, which turned out to be a really good decision. And struck up a conversation with a group of people from a mortgage company and basically just told them everything they were doing wrong in marketing. And it turned out I owned the company. So they offered me a job and
well, you got to speak truth to power, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't know that. I didn't know he owned the company at the time. But it turned out they were a mortgage company that acted as a mortgage department for credit unions that didn't have their own mortgage department.
Never heard that before.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that kind of gave me my entrance into working for credit unions. I'd always been a member of a credit union. I went to Michigan State University, go green. And my very first credit union was Michigan State University Federal Credit Union. Still love those guys. And they taught me how to write a check. Yes, I'm that old. Because back then I remember getting a debit card and having the machines eat them. That was good times, good times. But that's how I've always loved credit unions. I've always understood them from a consumer perspective, but it wasn't until I started working for the mortgage company that I really got an insider view of what it's like to work for a credit union. And the people helping people philosophy I fell in love with. It's part of who I am as a person. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. And the last 10, 15, 20 years, it's really been trying to keep that people helping people philosophy alive and well, but in digital spaces through personalization.
And in your previous time in South Florida, you did a really high profile partnership. I think it was the Panthers.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would love to take credit for that. But the reality is we had a board member who was a season ticket holder. And one day he said, how come we're not doing anything with the Panthers? And that was at the time when BB&T had kind of abandoned or they decided not to any longer be their primary sponsor. So all of a sudden financial institutions had the ability to get in. So we started meeting with them, created a contract. Now, again, timing is everything because
it is everything.
Our first year, they weren't expected to do anything, and they made it not only to the playoffs, and we were actually at the game where they secured the playoffs. So it was kind of crazy. But they also then made it all the way to the Stanley Cup finals. I have always been a hockey fan. My son played hockey. I used to actually work some Red Wings games years and years ago. So it was kind of exciting. I love to sit there and go, well, I planned this.
Well,
and then the following year they actually won.
Fortune favors the brave. It's we actually had the very same thing happen this year. One of our other larger creating clients, if they're on the call, shout out to Northwest Federal in the Washington D.C. area. Nate Turner, their SVP, secured a deal with the Commanders now under new leadership. Timing is everything. Obviously, for those who follow football, Commanders not only made the playoffs, they made it to the NFC title game.
I don't want to talk about that. They killed our Detroit Lions, and Lions are supposed to win the Super Bowl. So let's move on, Carl. I don't want to talk about
that. But the trackability on the campaigns that they ran in conjunction with that Commanders partnership. I mean, we're like, they're like weekly, like how much do we get this week from this partnership? And it's really driving, especially they had a promotion. Oh, anyway, that's working well for them. So proving the model that a credit union can step in and do a big deal and make it work.
Yeah, it did teach me a lot. That whole contract negotiation and working with the Panthers taught me a lot about partnerships with sports teams. And in fact, Public Service Credit Union has just signed recently with Wayne State University Athletics. So we actually are going to be working directly with their student athletes and their athletic department. So that my experience with the Panthers has sort of paved the way for us to do something at Public Service as well.
Right. So, now with your reputation as a thought leader and guiding the credit union community, now you have to, demonstrate that it works, right? And
but also, one thing I want to mention too, and this kind of goes back to meeting somebody at a party and just so happened to lead me to another job. Networks and relationships are, that's kind of what credit unions are known for. Even the Wayne State University partnership happened to come about because our CLO had an interaction with the athletic director at Wayne State, and a partnership sort of began to blossom and grow. So you just never know when you're meeting with members or you're talking with members and you're helping them figure out the next step in their financial life for their financial health and wellness, where that potential partnership could lead to. So always keep that in mind, that there's networks and partnerships out there all the time.
Fantastic. And at the end of the day, though, it comes back down to ROI. And being able to prove it to the C-suite, especially the CFO, which in many cases it's the CEO in waiting, right? Because that's the path to the corner office, is the CFO's office. They want to see concrete ROI figures, even before they commit to a bigger, the beginning of that bigger marketing budget. So tell us about how you've been able to successfully. I don't want to say position. It's more like just, demonstrate what marketing and what
Educate.
digital does for the
It's
credit union.
educate. It's
Yeah.
education. Yeah, that's a big piece of it is education. I think that there is an assumption that the C-suite knows all when it comes to numbers and ROI. And the reality is, unless they have a marketing background, which, by the way, I would like to push back on that CFO being the pathway to the CEO. I think that we've seen some pretty successful marketing and business development folks make their way up to the CEO, but that's a whole other program.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
but to understand the numbers and what conversions actually look like, you really need to take some time to educate the C-suite in terms of how things are really working. A lot of times what they end up doing is they're looking at that very last touch point, whether it be a branch or a call center, or even
Mhm.
somebody in the lending center who's actually finishing up a loan, and that's where the credit goes. The reality is it would never have gotten there if it hadn't been for marketing. So you have to be
Mhm.
able to look at that first touch point and
Mhm.
connect the dots to the last touch point. Not only will that give some credit to the marketing team, which what they're doing, but it also will help you refine your marketing and refine those dollars so you can compete with other bigger institutions. It's all about working smarter and not harder, and using those dollars wiser, not throwing them at a wall and seeing what sticks.
Mhm. 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 And so you talked about connecting the dots. You talked about, getting that sort of full view of the funnel from very first touch point, very first click, all the way to the end. I think you were telling me last time we spoke about, this, great book on Netflix. And,
Yeah.
what can credit unions learn from Netflix?
Well, first of all, I have to give some serious props to the head of our culture and communication at Public Service. Her name is Angie, and she created a book club basically. And one of my first tasks was I was going to join that book club, so I had to read this book very, very fast. And That Will Never Work is the name of the book. It's the history and the story of Netflix. And it was really fascinating because there was little bits and pieces in there all the time. And it was one of the things that was really interesting was the sustainability model of Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
because they
Mm-hmm.
went into it thinking that people would just want to rent DVDs through the mail, that they could do this, it's a disruptor, and they'd be able to do this and take business away from Blockbuster. But what they did is they were also making money either through rentals or through selling the DVDs. And what was happening was that they were making all their money on selling. Well, that's not repeat business. You're not going to get repeat business. People are going to buy one DVD. So they had to come up with some different models and shift things around so that they could find a sustainable model. They even met with Amazon. They knew that once Amazon started selling DVDs, they were going to be dead in the water. So they had to
Mm-hmm.
come up with something different. So it's all about, and I love in terms of their culture, in terms of saying, let's hire really, really smart people. This is your starting point. This is a really difficult problem we need you to handle and solve, and then giving them the space to do it. And that's what they did. And that's why they got to where they are today. So it really
Mm-hmm.
is looking at things outside the box, never discounting ideas, and knowing that you have to have a model that's sustainable over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain commonality, like, a business like Netflix, they're continuously, losing subscribers. There's a certain amount of churn. I think for Netflix, it's half a percentage point per month. Interesting enough, if you think about a credit union, your typical loan portfolio is evaporating at 2% per month as people pay back their loans, which is a good thing. You want people to pay back their loans, but that means your loan balance is continuously going down unless somebody is filling that bucket. So, and
Right.
you're the chief bucket filler. So, uh,
Um,
that's
I will tell you one thing. There's one really difficult roadblock I had for years. Once we started getting into digital marketing at Tropical,
mhm,
I learned a lot. I mean, the last 10 years in terms of marketing in that space. One of the things was just in terms of targeting, knowing where you're putting your dollars at, because you can't just throw a bunch of money and not really know where it's going to, because you're going to end up like getting direct messages from people saying, do you really want to be advertising on this far right wing or far right left wing or super religious site or cult or whatever? All of a sudden, you realize, you have to pay attention to where these ads are ending up. But that's a whole other story too. But one of our biggest things, we got really good at being able to track from that beginning point to the application, and then
mhm,
things fell apart. Even with our ad agencies, with tracking codes in every single touch point, even our printed materials had QR codes with unique tracking codes. Everything could be tracked to the beginning point, but we were only getting as far as the application. We needed to go even further because we needed to be able to track what happens when people are jumping channels. People are not going to necessarily do everything in a straight line. They need
Yeah,
time to
definitely
think
not
about
linear.
it.
That's
Right.
right.
It's not linear. They need to talk with their spouse, their partner. They need to know what the VIN number of the vehicle is, or maybe they just need to know how much they can afford, but they need to talk about it and go look for a car, et cetera, et cetera. They are not going to, very rarely are they going to go straight through, but we needed to be able to follow the person, not just the code. We could follow the code, the beginning of the app, but then we had to close the loop. And that's kind of where we had to find partners to help put codes inside the apps so that we could track not just that beginning code, but then the person and then all the way to the completed loan. So we could see from a marketing perspective, marketing people can't close loans. They can fill up the pipeline,
Right.
but they're not going to be able to close the
Right.
loans.
I mean, that's the key
So,
thing. The event is offline. You know,
right.
you got them essentially. You can take them as far as being a lead, but you know, in case of a vehicle loan, the monetization is like 2, 3, sometimes even 6 weeks after that last click.
Right. Okay. Especially with mortgages. You want to talk about a
Oh
long
my God.
lifespan.
Yeah, we're like
But
180 days sometimes on mortgages.
but or even new accounts coming through online, just to be able to track that all the way through, to understand where are the people dropping off, where are the friction points that are just too much for somebody to handle. You need to know that so that you can work with whoever your online digital account opening platform is, to say, okay, I'm running into a brick wall here, everybody's dropping off at this particular question at this particular page, so we need to make it easier. What can we do? And this is where your team, the marketing team, has got to work collaboratively with your other departments, mainly security and risk. Because if a lot of times you'll find different institutions will be very risk adverse and they don't want to do anything that could cause them any issues. But then at the same time, if you're too risk adverse, you're not going to be able to get people in through the door.
Yeah, I mean, look,
right.
people
That
are here
balance.
they're here for checking account, they're here for a vehicle loan, they're here because they have a financial need. They're not here for an IQ test, right?
Exactly. And quite honestly, they can open account through Chime in 45 seconds or something along those lines.
Yeah, not just Chime, by the
in
way.
in 2 pages or something.
If you want
But
to look beyond the neobanks, I want to say I'm going to call out Capital One 360 on the consumer side, BMO on the business banking side. Their process is extremely simple and it's ferocious. So anybody out there looking for a benchmark on how to do account opening and doesn't want to necessarily look at a neobank because your compliance is going to shoot down a neobank, BMO and Capital One,
but also when
banks.
you're talking about those size of institutions, they can absorb more risk than maybe a smaller credit union. But here's my point. My point is that you have to work in conjunction. You can't let the tail wag the dog, but at the same point in time, you have to be mindful. I always say that I'm like a helium balloon and I rely on our compliance, risk, and our money folks to be that string to tie me back down to earth, because you've got to have both. You can't just fly off into the universe with these great ideas and expose the credit union to all kinds of risk. And the other side of it, you can't let risk completely wag the dog where you're going to have shut down everything and you're not going to be able to grow. You got to find that balance, but you have to be able to work collaboratively so that you're working together. So that goes the same for all the vendors that you use. You have to be able to make sure that they're working together. You might have an agency on one hand that's out there placing all kinds of ads and might be bringing in all kinds of great traffic, but then it turns out that maybe it's a lot of bot traffic, or maybe it's a lot of it that's hitting the application, but it's not going all the way through. So you need to be able to look at what's happening on the back end, because your ad agency only knows what they're being able to bring to the front end. They don't know the whole story. So you have to continue to work with them. There's no such thing as set it and forget it. Even with really good ad agencies, you still can't let them just take over and you walk away. You have to be able to make adjustments. You have to come back and look at the results and make little tiny adjustments, A/B test. All these kinds of things are so critical to the success of any type of campaign that you're going to be running.
Thank you for pointing that out. Actually, we've seen a surge in Q4 of not so much bot traffic, but advertising content farms. So certain networks, all of a sudden, they go from being feeding you great traffic to all of a sudden, the clicks are still there, from a sort of top level perspective, it's all cool. But when you dig down into the data, it's like, why is this stuff no longer going to the bottom line? And it turns out it's all these garbage clicks from, frankly, websites that a credit union would not want to be associated with.
And that brings up a really good point, and that is, what are you watching?
Mhm.
Because if you're watching impressions and click-throughs, you're not looking at the picture.
Right.
Impressions and click-throughs are great for a reference point, but it is not what you should be paying attention to. You have to be paying attention to the conversions. What's the bounce rate? Because if you have like a 95% bounce rate, it doesn't matter how many impressions that you're getting to your website. It doesn't
That's
matter
right.
because they're bouncing right away. Either this is bot traffic and it's not going anywhere, or the content is not matching what the ads are talking about. You got to make sure that they're actually getting to the application and getting through the application to really count. The other
Hmm.
part of it is being able to report an ROI. Boy, marketing ROI. I swear to God, if I could actually come up with something that's super reliable, I would be a multi-billionaire. It's like the elixir, the magic potion that doesn't exist. And the reason that it's impossible to get a true ROI is because the reality is people don't pay off their loans all at the same time. They don't
Hmm.
stay all for the same amount of time. They don't use their debit card the same number of times. It's
That's right.
impossible to predict human behavior. You can get averages, and
Hmm.
that's what you should be looking at. So,
Right.
what is the average amount you make from a car loan? Okay, so use that. And then what's the traffic that came in from this ad on this ad platform? And how many loans did you get? How much did that
Yep.
cost
Yep.
you? How much are you going to make
That's right.
by on
That's right.
average? And then there's your calculation for an ROI. Use that as your guiding force. I actually would look at two different metrics. I would look at not only closed loans, because you still need to know what's closing, but I also want to know applications submitted, because that's what marketing is bringing in. Again, marketing can't close a loan. They can bring in the applications. But if there's a
Hmm.
huge gap between the number of applications being submitted and the number that are being approved, you got to look at that too and say, okay, where are
Yep.
we
Yep.
targeting this at? Or is this particular product not right for the areas that we're targeting? So that you can kind of close that gap a little bit, because you're also hurting your reputation if all you're doing is putting out an ad for something
That's
that
right.
you're just going to deny. So
Especially if you're
you
doing that
got to
to
weigh
your
all
own
these things
members.
out.
There's some folks out there that, like, oh, we got this great deal with Visa. We got this black card. Let's, promote this black card. And then, but your membership is, in the 600s. They're never going to qualify. And you're just going to, they're going to say, this is great. And then you're going to tell them no and, kick them in the pants. So
Yeah. And
yeah, be very
Carlo,
mindful.
that goes to another very, very important point. And it kind of goes also to what you were talking about, Capital One 360 Chime. It's know your audience.
Hmm.
Because if we were to chase all the shiny new toys and shiny little things, all we would be doing is chasing, and we would not be building our own castle in our own area. Know your audience. Who is your target audience? Well, if that shiny little toy, whatever, doesn't fit in your target audience, why are you chasing it? Why are you
Hmm.
trying to
Hmm.
do what the competitors are doing? Don't chase the competitors. Do what you do and do it really, really well. And if you are a digital first credit union, great, fantastic. Make sure that everything that you're doing can be done digitally and on a mobile phone. Otherwise, don't even look at it. Or if you're a credit union that really values face to face and a branch network, awesome. Then put your resources into that and to reaching people that want to connect and learn and grow and have that financial health and wellness. If your target is those lower credit scores or low income areas or areas that just can't get black cards, then don't have a black card.
Exactly.
Really, really simple.
Exactly.
Make
Exactly.
sure that you're fitting into who you're targeting. So know your audience, know who your credit union is supposed to be. What's the history of your credit union? And don't deviate from that just because there's all these shiny new toys. Do what you do and do it better than anybody else.
Fantastic. So we're just about to go into our Q&A section. So participants on the webinar, please submit your questions to the Q&A panel while we give you some time to start throwing some questions at Amy. Amy, tell us a little bit about the current outlook. We talked about helium balloons coming down. Obviously, interest rates, have been relatively high recently. They might be on the way down. But how's that shaping your
Yeah,
outlook for
there's some
2025?
predictions that they will start coming down a little bit this year. I think that, again, I wish I had a crystal ball. And with the new administration, actually, this is great. Actually, our head of risk actually sent out an email from America's Credit Unions that there's a website that you can go to that kind of talks about all these different executive orders and everything that's happening in Washington and how it relates to credit unions. Highly recommend that because I actually just started digging into that today. Really relevant information. I mean, there's even a whole section on AI.
Fabulous.
They want to remove regulations.
We'll put that in the follow-up
Oh,
notes
that'd be
to the
awesome.
webinar. We're going to send it to all the audience. Thank you
Yeah,
for
that
sharing
would be
that.
awesome. But in terms of bringing it back home, I think that we did a lot of home equities last year. There was a real focus for us on helping people consolidate their debt so they can get out of some higher interest rates. What we saw, we had this debt busters program, and we did see people were taking that up, but then people with homes were really tapping into their equity as well. And I think this is where you want to really make sure that you have some, you're arming your frontline with tools about education and wellness to make sure that the products, whatever they're looking for, fits their life. I have to tell you, one of the things I was so excited about and impressed with our CEO at Public Service is that he sort of made it a mandate that all of the employees be FICEP certified by the end of this year. And I think that it's very, very grandiose in terms of that's a big thing to make as a goal, but it really fits in with who we are and our culture. We have our AVP of member experience. Her name is Nadine, and she sort of has been heading this up and even got a grant to help us help people. And we're building some programs around that. But I think that falls right into, so knowing your membership and knowing what products are going to be right for the person that's in front of you. And you need to do that to make sure your front line is comfortable with those products. Your front line's not going to cross-sell a product they're not comfortable with. It's just reality. They're just not.
Absolutely.
If you have 30 checking accounts to choose from, they may very well just open a savings account and let the person figure it out for themselves, which is not what you want them to do. But you need to make sure that your frontline is comfortable with those things and take that very, very seriously. I'm going to admit something here. Those of you who know me already know this. I have never worked in a frontline position because I came in through the marketing door. I never worked at a branch before. I was never a teller. But once I move up to Michigan, I'm going to go through teller training. I'm going to work at a branch for a little while because I need to understand, really get a full picture of what it's like to sit down and have one of these counseling or coaching sessions. I need to really get a full picture of what it's like to fight fraud on the front lines and make sure this check is real or this person is real.
That's right. That's actually, when we look at decline reasons, most of them are, apart from the obvious ones, I hate your qual file. I think you're credit washed. I think your loan to income ratio coverage is not there, but a lot of it is like, I just don't believe this ID. This doesn't look right or smell right. Talking about frontline interaction, we have a hard-hitting question. So Steve Manharas, I'm gonna unmute your line and let you talk to Amy about magic formulas. Steve.
Hi, Amy.
Steve, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. Hey, good to meet you, Amy. My name is Steve Manharas. I'm based out of Washington State, and I'm the director for a credit union and director for a digital director for a credit union called Washington State Employees Credit Union, WSECU. My question for you is this: what would be the perfect executive level dashboard to measure ROI? What would you want to see on that dashboard?
In terms of marketing?
Yep.
Okay, I would want to know, what are the dollars that were spent in advertising and digital ads? And then how did that equate to applications and conversions, complete approved loans or new members? That's what I'd want to see.
Got it.
Simple.
Got it.
At an executive level, that's all I need to see.
That's it. That's fantastic. Yep. Okay.
But you need to, from a marketing level, you need to be looking at exactly every single product. You need to know where those ads are being placed and how they're working. You need to be able to be watching it carefully so that you can pivot. You need to be A/B testing, so you know if it's the QR code that's bringing you the business, or if it's the email that went out. It's your business development and what they're doing. You need to know all the sources of where that business is coming from. But from executive level, I want to know what I'm spending and what I'm getting.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And here's another thing along those lines, Steve, is that keep in mind, you're reporting on how these applications are getting into the system. So it's really important for the executive team to understand that when you're showing the result of those closed loans, some of those results might also be duplicated over here in the branches because they're the ones that closed it. It doesn't mean additional. It's sort of, it's not an aggregate. It's not all, added on and on and on. It's working together. So yeah, this is where marketing started, and this is where what they brought you, but they were the starting point. There is an ending point. They need to understand there's going to be some overlap in that. Does that make sense?
It does. I think it's you bring up an interesting point related to the branch. Trying to measure, if you're driving traffic into the branch, how would you go about doing that?
In terms of reporting it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's really important to understand that without that frontline person closing it, doesn't matter what you bring in, you still need that person. Because that human being is on one end, and they may have started digitally, and because they did a search or whatever, and then your
Right.
ad came up, they went to your website, but they want to talk to a human being. It's the human being that's going to close the deal.
Yeah.
So it's really important to understand there's a beginning point and there's an ending point, and without one, you can't have the other.
Okay, got it.
Steve, to give you like a sort of concrete example, what we've seen at other credit unions is putting a very simple email capture. Like for example, Amy's team was doing this at Tropical, but you can do it at many other places. You put a simple email capture on that very first step of digital. So before you even send them into the application, let me grab your email. Obviously, pass it through to the application so they don't have to type it in again. But then you've got that piece. Even if they don't finish the application, now you know that they're interested. You know what product they're interested. You can remessage them through email, cheap, safe. People will open emails. They will not open text messages about financial products. They've been trained not to do that, but they will open emails.
We did such a good job with that.
Yeah, and we call it rebound because it's just like basketball, right? It didn't go in the basket the first time, but you get you go get that offensive board. You take a second, third, fourth shot at it. Eventually, it'll go in. And if you have their email and they decide to go to it at the branch, well, you see that email in the branch data, and you go, okay, well, it was this thing, this vehicle loan was closed at the branch, but I got this thing through email capture 3 weeks ago, and I've messaged them 4 times in the interim, so I can now close that loop. So
and it's very, very important you're not pitting one department against another.
Right.
That I can't even stress that enough. Now, your CFO is going to want to reconcile the numbers, so they're not going to reconcile because there's overlap. That's where it's really important for them to understand that without that beginning point and without that ending point, there would be no loan or be no new member. So there's more than one ingredient to get to that final spot. But they need to, you need to be very clear about that and educate them up front on exactly how these numbers are coming through, so that there's that understanding that you're not going to take the total amount in loans that came through marketing and the total amount of branches and go, wait a minute, this isn't reconciling to our total loan for the month. So they need to understand there's going to be overlap, but it's an important overlap because without one, there's no other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like an influence model, right? So you're
exactly
right.
Exactly. Yes.
It's interesting. My background is in B2B marketing, and we had influence models because sales cycles took so long, and so you had to figure out like what were those touch points that contributed to the influence to that opportunity that would get created. So it sounds very similar to that. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And you want the marketing department and your business development departments and your frontline all to be working collaboratively together to make each other stronger. And you start pitting them against each other. Oh no, this is mine. Oh no, this is mine. Then it's a recipe for disaster.
Yep. Totally makes sense.
Steve, fantastic. Thank you so much for your contribution. So, Josh, we got some other more shy folks that have some questions. Let's make some room for them. If you could just read them out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course. As Carlos said, from Anonymous, so at a credit union, how would they balance the need for security and compliance with still being able to provide a user-friendly online experience?
So I kind of touched on this earlier. You need to make your
it's
risk
a struggle.
It's a struggle. Your best friend. But you remember when it used to be marketing and IT that didn't get along? Remember those days when marketing would want to be doing all these things digitally and IT be like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do it. Well, that that's sort of been solved. Now they're working very collaboratively together, and it's more like risk and compliance. But it's very important. I mean, even with your branches in terms of being compliant, you have to be compliant. It's a financial services industry. There's going to be way more compliance than there is, even when you're doing things like contests or little drawings and things, you still have to have those little rules, because you got to play the game correctly. You just don't want to expose the credit union unnecessarily. But at the same time, it's working collaboratively. And as long as you have somebody who can work with you and not be a defensive, no, and shut everything down. Because if you've got somebody like that, you've got the tail that wags the dog, and you're not going to grow. And that's where you're going to have to get some other departments involved. But work collaboratively. Give a little bit as well. Understand you're not going to get everything. So give a little bit, work with that particular department or that particular person. At Tropical, we had a lending compliance person and we had a deposit compliance person. So we had to deal with two different departments, but that was okay because we worked really well with both departments. And yes, they would come back and ask us to change things, and yes, add even more disclosures. Okay, so we have to lower the font size of whatever we had to do. We did what we had to do to make sure that we could do what we needed to do to grow. So my only advice is, just like I said before, is work collaboratively with them and understand they have a job to do as well. And that is to keep the credit union safe.
Fantastic. We're nearly at the bottom of the hour. Josh, we have time for just one more question. So pick one and throw it to Amy.
Sure. This is from Brandon. He says, how can any tips on how to improve your website without, sorry, I apologize. How to improve our website's ability to convert visitors without a full redesign?
Yeah, first of all, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. So a redesign may not necessarily solve any of the issues that you might be having. I think content is really important, and understanding SEM, having somebody who knows digital, either on your team or through an agency, can help with that. Looking at things like your traffic and your bounce rate, understanding when you have a campaign going, you're watching these things very carefully. And again, if you're seeing high bounce rates, then there's a disconnect with that. If you're not seeing any click-throughs in terms of on your website to the application, I don't care about click-throughs to the website. That's impressions, click-throughs. That's those are vanity metrics. But actually clicking over to the application and starting an application, if there's that disconnect, then look at what are the ads that are going there. What do the ads say? And think about what is it that they're expecting on their other end. If it's not there, then redo the website, that particular landing page. Use landing pages too. Don't ever have your ads go to a regular website. Okay, that you want to make sure that there's a connection between what the ad is saying and what that landing page is saying. At Tropical, we always used the same graphic. Whatever the graphic was in the ad was the graphic that would be on the landing page. It also helped with tracking everything as well. So everything would be only going to that particular landing page. So you don't have to completely do a redesign of your website. You can just redesign the landing pages to make them more effective. That's that growth-driven design model where you're continually making sure that your landing pages are effective. And making the changes that you need to make sure that you're converting the traffic, and doing a lot of A/B testing, because you can have two different landing pages, you have two different sets of ads, changing colors, changing the button, change what says on the button, things like that, to find out what is resonating with the person that's getting over there, and the content too. Make sure it matches what you're promising.
Right. So if I can synthesize this for Brandon, the way to think about it is, what is the happy path that we want to take these people down, and then secret shop the happy path, right? So you're running a campaign, say for high yield checking on Google. So bust out your phone, because that's where 65% of the searches come from. They come from mobile phones. Bust out your iPhone, type in high yield checking, make sure your ad comes up. Your ad comes up, click on the ad, go through it on a mobile device. See if, you can figure out what to do next, because sometimes there's this like, oh, we use cookies, and that takes up all the screen, and on a mobile device, you're dead. Or you can't find the high yield checking thing in the hamburger menu, or there's some, disclosure thing that takes up the, whole screen, or opens a PDF view, or some other kind of nonsense. So just secret shop, just a happy path, not the whole site, not everything, just the 4 or 5 steps that you want these prospects to take from that Google ad, all the way to the submitted application. And sometimes you'll discover that's really ugly, and like, no wonder that, this is not monetizing, because we put too many roadblocks, and then you just go fix those 3 things, not the whole site, just a happy path. So
I love that. I'm going to use that from now on, the happy path.
all right. Well, I'm glad this is a two-way street, Amy. So time for closing comments. I know you're super excited about moving back to Michigan, back to your roots, back to public service. So please,
I am.
nobody try to recruit her and give her too much stuff to think about. But if you could share your top 3 tips for the audience, and then we'll let you go.
I think I said them all already, but I will reiterate, track everything. I'll give you an example that we had some QR codes in our branches, but they all went to the same place. They were all the exact, so we had no idea which branch was getting what traffic. You can create unique codes, Bitly. You can use Bitly, I mean, if you have to create
Bitly's
unique
fantastic.
links. Yeah, exactly. So track everything. Make sure everything that you have done is trackable. I think you said it too, in terms of creating, think outside the box to create a pathway. Like you said, collect from a form, collect a name and email address before you send them off to the application, and see if that when they submit it, have them redirect back to a thank you page on your website, so you can see if you can close the loop in that way. But tracking everything, try to ignore vanity metrics, and in that same vein, what you're tracking and what you're showing has value. That's what you need to educate to your C-suite, so they understand exactly what you're doing and how you're getting there.
It's all about the Benjamins.
It's all about the Benjamins. And then the last thing is stick with what works. Know your audience, and don't try to chase all the shiny new toys and all the things that are happening out there. It's good to know what your competitors are doing. I'm not saying ignore your competitors. I'm saying don't chase them. Know your audience, stick with what you guys do it better than anybody else, and continue with the people helping people at the foundation of it all.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been such a terrific chat. Amy, I look forward to seeing you in Austin.
I'm not going to be there.
Oh no.
I know.
Well, I look forward to seeing everybody else in the credit union space in Austin. Well, let's catch you next time.
You guys all have a drink for me though, okay?
We most certainly will. All right. Be well.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.